not a lot of filmmakers think like startups.
Can you picture for us that 10 years from now, how this whole industry ideally would work to give a chance for everybody?
Daren Smith is an independent film producer, author, creative entrepreneur, and strategist. Two of his latest works, The Faith of Angels and The Carpenter, are now being played in theaters. We will talk about challenges and opportunities in the independent film industry, distribution strategies, audience building, and the impact of streaming platforms.
Every single big studio tried to do the Netflix model, and Netflix is the only one that's doing it profitably. I don't think that's the answer for indie filmmakers. I think it's going to be more what you're talking about, which is
you've been involved in producing films that I've seen, and that alone, I believe that we can navigate here the conversation, but you have to help me out also.
I love talking about distribution is kind of top of mind right now. We have 2 movies in theaters this weekend, which is crazy. The Carpenter and Faith of Angels will both be in theaters this weekend. Which one did you see? I'm surprised you've seen a movie of mine in Barcelona.
No, I watched Give Me Your Eyes.
Oh, no way.
and actually, I liked it. I mean,
yeah, it's a fun one, but I'm surprised because not many people have seen it because it hasn't been released in the US anywhere.
Yes, that's why I will not say how I managed to watch it.
That's okay.
Which is the things that we're trying to avoid with what we're building, you know?
Yeah.
Because the problem that it's out there is that I've ended up pirating it because there was no way of actually seeing it anywhere. Therefore, if I would have been given the option, I would have totally paid for it. But there was no way that was an option for me. And at Olyn, we do a bunch of that. We even have worked with like teams that they're experts in piracy to make sure that piracy does not exist because we don't want to pay for the creativity. It exists because there is a principle to not make monopolies of those that hold a catalog. Mm-hmm. Because they have a say what gets to be streamed and what doesn't. Like kind of like going away from like... But anyway, this is not what I want to discuss. And I will like wire you the money for the ticket for having pirated that. Okay. And then we can explain the story about me paying tribute for work. I pirated it. I reached out there and I sent him $12 and... You know?
Cool. Well, and I think we did a good job casting the movie to where it had a demand, right? We have Elifer and Mauricio in it, and a lot of people know who they are and are fans of theirs. I do think that's an important thing for indie filmmakers, though, is that the idea of releasing your movie in Windows can sometimes hurt your ability to reach the audience that wants your movie. Like, it really is on us as producers to think about it so much earlier than we typically do and say, here's the strategy and here's how we're going to get it out worldwide at the same time. It doesn't have to be day and date where it's on streaming and theatrical the same day, but you know, we have 2 movies out and we have people in London and in Brazil and in Switzerland and in Japan that are like, when do we get to see it? And our answer is we don't know because we haven't even thought about international distribution yet. We are just starting with Faith of Angels. We'll be at AFM next month. But like the fact that we don't have an answer when our movie is currently playing in the US is just not fair, and it's not a good experience for the audience.
So Daren, if I may, I mean, for the sake of the rest of us, what does it mean to you, like international distribution? How does it look like from a filmmaker perspective?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the definition would be outside of the country you live in and are releasing the movie in domestically. So for us, that's the United States. That's where we filmed Faith of Angels, What Comes Around, Give Me Your Eyes. We actually filmed The Carpenter in Cape Town, South Africa, but it's being released in the United States. So, you know, the filmmaker, the writer-director, Garrett Batty, and myself, and many of the lead actors are from here in the States. And so that's the domestic release. So anything outside of really North America, which, you know, you're really looking at United States and Canada, which is part of the domestic release, anything outside of that is international. But it really comes back to a supply and demand issue of people in Barcelona don't even know our movie exists because we haven't done any marketing or awareness there. So unless they're following me or the filmmakers or some of the actors, or they follow a blog that wrote about it, they wouldn't even know the movie existed. So if we tried putting the movie in theaters in Spain, we'd have nobody show up because we don't have any marketing going on there. So it's really about how big of a market can we market to? And for
Yeah.
both of these movies, that's the United States. That's what our budget allows for.
It's very interesting because you speak of budget, but there is we believe that there is the true nature of interest. Like the world is already connected through WhatsApp, through the internet, social media accounts, and sometimes I match certain preference when it comes to entertainment with somebody that comes from a complete different world. And those movies come to me in a higher speed that the media industry and their distribution can pick up on. Because it's like boom, 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 a person to another person to whoever. And then you kind of are left in the blank because it's like, I want to see it. Now, I cannot because I have no means. It's not available in any of the platforms that I'm subscribed to, nor I can pay for it. Therefore, I feel like I'm left in the blank and I'm out of the conversation because my friends are already talking about it in Chile, but down here I can watch it, so nor they can spoil it for me. And
Yeah.
it's a very interesting thing because we call it entertainment, but I also think sometimes it's a community-driven subject. Like, people when they don't have anything to talk about, they talk about the weather. And usually that's when you jump on a cab, you want to have a conversation with the driver, at least in Spain, because everybody's quite chatty. But you feel so tense that you don't know, and you're like, oh, quite a weather, yeah. But I'm telling you, lately is all about, have you seen this movie? And he's like, no, have you? I'm like, yeah, it's so good. And he's like, don't tell me, but I'll watch it just because. And I think like entertainment brings subjects together in a community base that it's the most community driven thing on the internet today. And that's why I'm like very curious on the people that are 100% involved in this. How do they envision speeding up the distribution in a way that fits the dynamics that already people are living in, the network effect system that has connected the world together digitally?
Yeah. I had two thoughts on that. The first is, there's only a handful of companies that can do a international release. You've got 5 studios, maybe 2 mini majors like a Lionsgate, or I don't even think A24 or Neon could do an international release where it would be highly profitable like a Disney or a Universal or a Warner Brothers release. So if you're an independent filmmaker and Disney or Universal doesn't pick up your movie, then how do you get international distribution? Well, the next step is you could look at streaming platforms. You could look at Netflix, Amazon, maybe Apple, maybe Hulu. Like a lot of those aren't even international. And so without the distribution partner who can release the movie internationally, you can't reach that audience. But I think the second piece is independent filmmakers especially need to be thinking more like they are building an audience of people who want to see their movies. And that's an international audience because you're not limited anymore by boundaries. It's the internet. Like you said, we could text a friend in London about our movie, and if it's playing, they could go see it, but the movie isn't playing. So you need both parts. You need the awareness and the audience. So filmmakers really need to start thinking about how are we going to reach 10,000, then 100,000, then a million, then 10 million people. Because if you have an audience of 1 million, maybe 10% of them will go to the theaters and buy a movie ticket, but that's $1 million box office. So you're going to need a lot more revenue from the box office to justify an international release, which costs a lot to market and distribute. So there's all these economics at play. But I think if we as independent filmmakers are so over-reliant on a distributor to make our movies successful, then we're abdicating the responsibility and we're limiting our chance to have any upside or participation in the profit of the movie. Because if they're taking all the risk to put the movie out internationally, they deserve a bigger chunk of the pie of the revenue. So there's all these things at play, but I think those two, like understanding distribution and the partners required in order to do that successfully internationally, and taking the responsibility to build the audience so that you can start doing more of it on your own, Those are the two things I'm thinking a lot about.
Right. It's I mean, one of the things I believe that sort of people that do not understand much about the industry, because it has overcomplicated itself on its own for growing in the wrong direction, maybe because the tech and I think like the road of it has been mostly accidental, and it just has. There was a moment in time that there was like left or right, and they took left, and that was it. So that's why I'm not trying to criticize how things are today, but I am saying that I believe that for the filmmakers today there is a lack of tools for them to find their way in, because nobody knows better the product than the one that made it. And the people involved in that film, they know who they were addressing to, what was the story, who like, and I believe like when it's being given away, like there's a huge gap on actually addressing in first place to the people that you had an intent towards to. And that's why Daren, I'm like, you mentioned something, and I can help myself to make an analogy that giving a movie away to a production company just because they have a way of distribution, it's like me coming up with a product and pitching it to Walmart for them to put on a shelf, and it's up to Walmart to do so. But in the digital world, we got Shopify, and all those technologies that help you go directly to your consumer at your risk, and then all the tools to market that at a certain budget and everything. And then we got this example of Peloton going public by going direct to consumer, and so forth. How much do you think like the filmmaking people that aren't involved in the filmmaking industry will be able to take the same risks that people that were in the physical goods went independent direct to consumer? How much do you think like such tools will actually give them more powerfulness than actually making them feel less for not feeling cool because Walmart didn't pick them?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think what I struggle with is that you have to have both sides of that transaction there, right? So if I've given a tool like Shopify, or take something like Vimeo over the top, where you can rent or stream or sell your own movies to your audience, but my audience is 100 friends and family on Facebook, how do I make $1 million budget movie and get $1 million plus in revenue on the back end? And that's unrealistic if I have an audience of 100 people who can see the movie is for sale and potentially purchase it. So I'm going to need a much, much, much bigger audience. And you can reverse engineer the numbers all day long, depending on which channel it is, whether it's a theatrical channel or a streaming channel or an ad-supported channel or whatever. But I think you have to have the tools, yes, but if you don't have the audience or the money to reach the audience through marketing and advertising, it doesn't work. So not a lot of filmmakers think like startups, where they're thinking about, okay, we took on a bunch of money and part of that is going to product and part of that is going to growth, where we're building the audience as we're building the version 1 or the beta and the version 2, or as we're getting ready for launch. Startups thinking about wait lists and all the different strategies to grow and reach an audience for as cheaply as possible, and thinking about things like CAC and customer acquisition costs and all those things, whereas filmmakers don't do that. Filmmakers think, how do I make the best movie that I want to make? And then that's the end of it. And then they go, okay, now I made the movie, who wants it? And then they're shocked when there's no buyers and no market. And instead, if we started thinking more like startups, it would actually benefit us a lot, because we would actually have good business instead of just being creatives. But the other side, I think, another quick thought is like the streamers are consistently making it less profitable to be on their platform, because what they've done is commoditized movies. And they said, well, we have the biggest library. Well, that's not necessarily what we want. We want the movies that we want to watch. And if the 10 movies I want to watch are on some indie platform, I'm going to go there. But that's what they've done. And so if you're an indie filmmaker trying to get on Netflix so you can get international distribution, well, they don't do upfront deals anymore. Well, they'll pay you $1 million to license your movie for 3 or 5 years. They're going to do a streaming revenue model, which is for every hour streamed, you get some fraction of a cent that goes to your payout. And so you need tens of millions of hours of streaming in order to make any meaningful amount of money on these platforms. Same with Amazon Prime, same with Netflix, same with all these streamers. And that's where I think we took a right turn where we should have taken a left turn, as far as every single big studio tried to do the Netflix model, and Netflix is the only one that's doing it profitably. And so I don't think that's the answer for indie filmmakers. I think it's going to be more what you're talking about, which is, let's get the tools we need. Let's build the audience we need that can support a release
Right.
of, can we make $100,000, or can we make $1 million, or can we make $10 million, because of the size and the desires of our audience?
Exactly. That's a good point, because it's almost saying, well, if Netflix took such a great job in their hands, they haven't necessarily became Google for all media. Therefore, they started something that it's not done, nor they will be the ones to get it done, because they are sitting somewhere between TV and Google. Only because you can search for a limited amount of content. My thinking, Daren, is there's something about being picked up for these few catalogs that are out there that gives you a certain reputation, and the mix of it. And in the physical goods world, actually, this commodity like changes. You can start independently, and then all of the sudden, like, supermarkets will pick up on you. Like, you have the example of the makeup that happened with Glossier. They went independent, opened their own shops, and then right now Sephora is selling some of their products, not all. Then you have Olipop, started independent, sold in some gyms and stuff, and then right now they're all over Walmart. I'm just saying it's a beautiful thing to imagine the same use case for filmmakings, where it's not like I decide to go this path and that's it, I sign up for it, right? Because people's interest, like right now I have interest for movies that they were made in 2016. What a commodity, right? Like, it plays so well in time. It's better than real estate almost. It's like its value can spike at a different time in a different moment, and it's still there. So how do you play that? And for me, it's less about going against the way things are right now. It's bringing more Lego pieces so you can make the most out of this commodity that you spend so much time on it, that you stretch time, instead of like reducing it and looking for like a immediate outcome when the launch happened. And my concern is, like, how long is it going to take to, because I come from another industry, you come from filmmaking, but you have this concern, so you and I understand each other, even though I'm bringing certain comparisons. How long do you think it's going to take for the current filmmaking industry or players to kind of like understand that there is this like switch, or there's more opportunities, or embrace those ones?
I think we're either on the cusp of it, or it's happening already. I know a lot of the people that I interact with online are having the same conversation of, like, it's time. We need a non-dependent or a truly independent film ecosystem that's decoupled from the studios and the streamers, because they've sucked all the profit out of the marketplace. They're all in it for shareholder value and dollars. And it's not about art, and it's not about serving the audience at all. And the people that care about movies as art pieces, not necessarily pure art or vanity projects, but where they're trying to tell a real story that isn't watered down, where they're trying to tell a niche story that can't be told by a studio, like, that's happening for sure. But I think it's important to note that, like, the examples you called out, there's like one of those in every industry, right? And so that idea, I don't think plays to the industry at large. Like, if we have 1 million independent filmmakers, there's not room on shelves, so to speak, even if those shelves are digital, for 1 million movies. Netflix only produces, I think last year they were trying to do one new release a week, which is insane. Like, a studio doing 50 movies in a year is insane. The big studios are doing like 8 to 12 a year.
Okay,
So,
Daren, I need to make a parenthesis there.
yeah.
Whatever Netflix is doing lately, either they feel like I'm dumb or something, but it's not intellectually provoking. It just worries me that their analytics says that this is something I might like or watch because it has
Yeah, I
some
think that's
crazy
the
romance, an old lady with a young dude falling in love, a winemaker from Australia, and a farmer from, I don't know. What I'm saying is like they're reducing the, you know, opportunities for people to empathize with the rest of the world. So what they're selling, it's a waste of time.
Yeah, and I think from the filmmaker side, you got to choose what you're optimizing for. You talked about like when are we going to shift away from that? Well, for a lot of filmmakers, it's more important to get international distribution, even if the movie doesn't make money, because that's more awareness for their next project. It's definitely more desirable for the actors that are getting exposure to an international audience because that's more valuable to them than the receipts in the box office. They've already been paid. And so, yeah, if they make any extra money on the back end, great. But given putting it up on your own platform where you have an audience of 10,000 people and putting it on Netflix with 250 million subscribers all over the world,
Right. Yeah.
an actor is definitely going to say, let's go to Netflix. I don't care about the money, put it on Netflix. Whereas the filmmaker, especially speaking as a producer who's got responsibilities to the investors that put money into the movie to pay for the negative cost to make the movie, well, if I don't get their money back, and with interest ideally, then I can't go ask them to make the next movie. And so you can't optimize for both unless you are big enough to have deep enough pockets to say, yeah, we're going to invest in both sides. But as a filmmaker, or as a producer, I should say, I have to be thinking about revenue and recoupment and paying back the investors as the number one thing. Because if I don't do that, I don't have a job. And the goal that I have is to create what you're talking about, which is like a more independent and direct to consumer opportunity. I think there are people doing that really well right now, but it requires a massive amount of scale because otherwise you're on the opposite side or the wrong side of supply and demand. If you've got more supply than there is demand from the marketplace, then that's a race to the bottom. And I think that's what Netflix is in right now. Let's just saturate the market with more and more and more stuff. But if it's not valued by the subscribers, they're going to go, well, if my one show that I care about isn't on anymore because they canceled it, I'm going to cancel my subscription. I go to Netflix, and we all are different. So you're speaking about your experience, I'm speaking about mine. But there's 2 shows on Netflix I care about right now. The rest I'm not watching. And they have tens of thousands, if not
No,
hundreds.
absolutely. I'm not trying to neglect the good work.
Yeah.
I'm
No,
just
what I'm
saying,
saying, like, they've
I'm not saying
oversaturated
like
the
they
market.
should not exist. I'm just saying it should exist even more options
Yes.
for the current filmmaking. Because I think you should simultaneously be on Netflix. And if I'm decide as a person to not be subscribed to Netflix and just pay for your movie, same as like, I don't want to subscribe to you, Bloomberg. I just want to read this article. Let me be, right? Why not enable that? Considering like today, the internet should serve us. It should not impose just one way or the other because the tech allows so. So,
Yeah. Well, that's a very
I'm
altruistic statement
Yes.
for businesses that exist in capitalistic societies, unfortunately. Like, yes, I agree. It would be amazing if it worked that way, but it won't in the setup we currently have because it's all about market share and shareholder value and revenue and up and to the right. And so that's what you're competing against. But I do think, to go back to an earlier point you made about like Olipop and the makeup brand, is like, yeah, you've got to become so good that they can't ignore you. You've got to create your own market for your product to show that there's more demand than supply. And if you can say, hey, we're Olipop and we have demand for 10 million cans a month, but we can only manufacture and distribute 5, we need help. Well, that's when you can attract a bigger production partner and a bigger distribution partner like Walmart to say, yeah, let's blow this up, because you don't have the resources to do it yourself. It's the same thing with independent film, but you have to take the responsibility as the owner of the business that made the film to say, hey, let's create demand for this thing so then we can attract the production partners, the distribution partners, the marketing advertising partners that can help blow it up. If you just go to Netflix, you say, I made a movie and it's really good, but nobody cares because no one knows about it, that's not very valuable to Netflix.
Very interesting. Yes. So Darren, like, right now, when you're making a film and you have the audience in mind, how much you compromise the message of the true message that you want to pass on through the film, by applying certain techniques that will please the audience, but will sacrifice the true message of it because it will not be entertaining enough?
That's an interesting question. I do think about that a lot. I think rather than ever compromising, I don't ever think in terms of compromising. It's always about what's serving the audience most. And I do think that there are really important genre conventions and promises that you're making to an audience with the trailer of a movie, for example, saying this is a horror movie, or let's not use horror, let's use a faith-based movie. You know, what are the things that people, the audience that goes and buys tickets to a faith-based movie, what are they expecting? They want to see people express their faith. They want to see challenges of faith. They want to cry. They want an emotional response from that experience. And so delivering on those genre conventions is very important, and it's something I take very seriously as a producer and someone who's stewarding a story from the mind of a screenwriter and a director over to an audience. I need to make sure it's going to deliver. Like if you have a mystery movie with no mystery or no, you know, who done it, or this is how you did it, then that's not very exciting. If you watch Sherlock, you want him at the end to say, this is how I know how you did the thing that you did. And that's a payoff that if it was missing from the movie or the show, the audience wouldn't come back for the next episode because you let them down. So I'm rarely thinking about how do we calculate what the audience wants. And I'm thinking a little bit broader or bigger umbrella around what's the genre? What's the story we're trying to tell? What are the conventions and the expectations of this genre to make sure we hit those marks in a unique, artistic, satisfying way to everyone who's making the movie?
I understand. Yeah, I see. Because maybe because I'm coming from the startup world, I'm using the wrong words, such like, you know, posing, this, that. But I see that there's so much opportunity in the space that the only way things that haven't been completely prized by the streaming platforms today have currently made an influence on me. I've been the biggest marketer of all on my limited, influencing environment. But to certain movies, I actually been the biggest marketer. I'm like, you gotta watch this. Oh my God. Like, it's amazing. It's amazing. Oh my. And I'm like, I even check out, have you seen it? Because I want to talk to you. I can't wait about it. So I understand like the wording has been a little more aggressive on my side. But Daren, what's your dream about the future of filmmaking? How do you see the industry, considering you're very close to how the industry operates, how would you like to have a turn? Can you picture for us that 10 years from now, how this whole industry ideally would work to give a chance for everybody?
Yeah, I don't think you're being that aggressive. I actually talk about these things in a very similar manner of like, we're not doing the things that we need to be doing to find success here. And my approach to the next 5 and 10 years is not to try and somehow persuade or convince the studios and the industry at large to do something different, because that's often in their worst interest or not in their best interest. And the idea of me convincing Universal and Disney and Warner's to do something different that's not going to happen. That's, I'm not even in LA. I don't have those connections. I live in Utah. Like, I'm an independent filmmaker. So rather than trying to change the existing system, I'm looking more at building a different one that works better, that is optimized for the path of the independent filmmaker to be able to connect with their audience in the way that you're talking about. And so part of that is being responsible with the budgets. Like the idea of a $15 or $17 million indie film reaching an independent market without the help of a large distribution partner is unrealistic. Because you need to 2.5x your budget in order to recoup, right? So if you spent 15, you need to make 35 or 40. How are you going to do that without a big theatrical release? There's no way to make 40
Right.
million in streaming, right? You can't even sell that movie at a festival for 40 million. You can sell it maybe for 15 to 20. So part of it is starting with more realistic budgets, sub $5 million, and saying we can do a lot and we can tell really amazing stories for under 5 million, but we're not going to make the next Star Wars or Marvel movie. Like that's not going to be part of the equation. And then it's really understanding and broadening our responsibility and realizing that 50% or more of the success of your movie is marketing and distribution. And if you spend 1,000 hours making the movie, well, how many hours are you dedicating to marketing and distribution? And if it's less than 100, or dare I say less than 10, that's an imbalance that you've got to rectify as a filmmaker. Whether you're the writer, director, producer, executive producer, grip, makeup artist, production art, designer, whatever it is, like if you want the movie to succeed, you need the exact same amount of time and effort going into the marketing and distribution of the movie as you do the production. And that's just let's call it 1,000 hours like linearly, but then you multiply that by 100 people and now you have 100,000 hours that went into the production and the making of the product. So if you're really being honest and you say 50% of the success is the marketing, how are you going to put 100,000 hours into the marketing and distribution of the movie? That's an insane question, but that's the question I think I'm working towards and building towards, because what I want to see in 5-10 years is real paths to profitability for independent filmmakers, that they have a lot more stake in, that they have a lot more upside, because I'm a huge fan of indie film. We don't have the big outcomes like Barbenheimer last year, Barbie and Oppenheimer. If Greta Gerwig first doesn't do Nights and Weekends and Lady Bird, and Christopher Nolan first doing Following and Memento, all of those were sub $4 million budgets. So you don't get big, awesome original movies for a worldwide audience if you don't first invest in filmmakers early in their career, telling really small, specific, amazing, impactful stories. And so what I'm building toward is like, how do we invest in independent film in a profitable way? So it's not just charity, it's not a throwaway, because what I keep seeing is people who passionately enter the marketplace as an investor. They have someone they're connected to, a family member maybe, or a friend. They say, yeah, I'll give you $1 million. Yeah, I'll give you $150,000, whatever it is. But there's no plan for that filmmaker to make money back. They just go make a movie and then they go, well, it didn't get picked up, so I'm sorry, but you don't get your money back. Well, now that investor's gone. They're never going to invest in movies again. And I want to solve that. So if we can, whether it's through the companies and stuff that I'm building and working on, and like working with us, or whether it's just doing what we're doing for yourself, that's why I'm coming on podcasts. That's why I'm writing a book. That's why I have my own podcast and blog, because I want as many people as possible to take on that mindset of I'm responsible not just for the making of the movie, but the making of the money after the movie's released. And if we can do that, then we have a much more self-sufficient, truly independent film ecosystem that works for a lot more people, including a lot more investors.
Daren, I think
I liked your reaction to that.
yes, because I think you've said things that with filmmakers that we spoke with, they weren't even. I felt like there was some rejection, like their brain was like, oh, I'm too wild to even think such way, because that's not how the world works. But I'm like, that's the way the world should work and the way it will work. So it's all about your capacity to change your mind, because there is coming a new generation, like Gen Z, whatever, which these guys, like, wherever they spend their money on or their time on, there's no way they're not going to share it. It's like, it's like a coming with their birth certificate. When they're born, they're like, from now on, you guys will report whatever the hell you do. I'm not sure if it was a gene modification or whatever, but I swear, like, this new generation, literally, they speak up for everything they do. And that's the way they feel connected to the world, because there's a magic on the internet that we, through at least my generation and yours, we are same generation, Daren, it's kind of a little shy, you know, like there's but for them it's like it's not just my group of friends, it's also my friends from my video game, my friends from wherever I can. So when you said about distribution, it came into my mind the world about speed. One of the things that happened in tech startups that made startups to be so resilient to enable innovation, it's that they had an investment group of people that were aware of stretching time. And why we have Amazon today and why we have all other new technologies is because investors were like, do not please look for revenue in the next 7 years. Just make the best out of it. So if you just can enable some to have like a breath of air and stretch time and see beyond it, I believe that their imagination and capabilities will be less stressed about, oh, I need to make money with this movie next week, whatever, like next month, because look, during COVID, there were a bunch of movies that were making, like they were made back in 2006 about viruses and stuff that they were like top hit. Nobody knew
Yeah.
about them, and all of a sudden during COVID, everybody knew about them.
Mhm. Yeah.
My point is, there's a new generation that makes that speed faster. Like they see something, they'll pass the word and everything, which is what e-commerce is picking up to. The most precious products I bought, they're not from like they're literally from independent sellers that I found through an Instagram or promoting it, saying like, oh, I love this thing, I love that. And that defines a little bit of the magic of people speaking up, because I feel closer to somebody I follow than I feel closer to a random algorithm that thinks this is something I would like. And back to that, Daren, I think because AI is such a strong technology today that it's going to make a bunch of improvements in our life, equally, people's connections are going to become much stronger. Therefore, I think that it's all about understanding in an analytical way how fast can a movie speed up through network effect by tackling certain communities to pass the word on. And that's where we at Olyn, we want to make them earners. It's like, oh, you pass the word, you earn if anybody buys through your link to purchase the movie. But that aside, without thinking of Olyn at all, it's just basically thinking from the way things supposed to work. As I've been entertained, but I also think that this is everything I like, and I'm not trying to attach everything to my own way of doing things, but I kind of approached some psychologists. One was like a Stanford psychologist and MIT from Washington. Next podcast, if they let me say their name, I'll say it. But they approved my point about people have a psychology trait that when they like something, they share it right away. Even our generation, not Gen Z, like, because it's a way of connecting. It's a way of giving. It's like a constant Christmas. I love something. Can I recommend you something so you don't waste your time? And it's a subconscious trait. But I think all this information is missing for the filmmaking industry to understand how powerful they are by going direct to consumer, combined with also using the streaming platforms. I'm getting very passionate on these conversations because I feel like we're sort of like like-minded here. And I also think through what I saw on Instagram that you're doing a lot of work to improve creativity in very different ways and give everybody guts to go and chase those paths. What is the genesis, Daren, of you doing so? Why are you doing it in first place? Why are you putting so much effort to your Instagram account? Why are you doing films? I mean,
I've thought about that a lot. I don't know that I have the best answer yet, but I think it comes back to I didn't have a mentor or anyone showing me the path of how to do this thing. And I knew that I wanted to make movies as a producer starting in around 2009. And I didn't produce my first feature-length independent film till 2021. So that's 12 years of working really, really hard and doing everything I could find, whether it was from a book or later a podcast or a YouTube video or a seminar or a conference or a coach or whatever. I took all the advice and none of it worked. And then finally made some shifts in my own life, which I could talk about in a different time maybe, but like really taking on that responsibility and saying, okay, here's the outcome I want. Here's how I'm going to reverse engineer how I'm going to get there. Set a new goal. I want to produce an independent film here in Utah in the next year. And then systematically worked every day towards that goal, and it happened. But 12 years is a long time, and most people don't have the benefit to be able to last that long. Like, luckily, I ran a video production company. I had income, right? But I wasn't doing what I wanted to be doing. And most people don't have that sort of determination or fortitude. I'm not saying I'm special, but I'm just saying statistically, most people won't pursue a goal for 12 years. I don't want it to take that long for other people. And I can't justify complaining about my situation or my experience if I'm not in the same breath willing to do something about it for the people who are in the same situation I was in now. So there's someone out there, there's probably hundreds and maybe even thousands of people, filmmakers, who desire to be filmmakers. They just graduated school, they're 20, 22, 24 years old, and they have no clue how to do this for a living. Well, if I can write books, get on podcasts, post on it on social media and say, here's how I did it, and here's how it's working now, then maybe that gives them some sort of pseudo mentorship to be able to help their path not take as long. And the reason that matters is because I want a future filled with art, not with AI. And so the race to the bottom has already been won. Like, if you want pure commodity filmmaking, that's going to be generated by AI, and it's going to cost $20 a month or whatever it costs to have an LLM that's working for you. If you're Netflix, like, you're going to own your own. It's going to make movies based on your top hits, and they will be AI generated, and they'll pop out every day or every week. So you can't beat that as far as profitability goes. So the race to the bottom is not the answer. But if we can, if all of the artists are wiped out because it's not sustainable to be in this industry, then we're left with that. And that's not interesting to me. That's actually scary to me. So I want a future filled with art, filled with music, filled with film, filled with art and dance and all the things. And we have to invest in the ecosystem that makes it sustainable for those artists if we want to have a future like that.
And you know what? I think, Daren, that there were better times for you to accomplish that vision than it is today. Because we've seen it happening already in other industries. It's just a matter of giving some guts to others to pursue that path and get themselves. And that doesn't mean kill the old or the past. Like, let's not think wrong about it. It's a combination that it even helps them, because we've seen that already happening in a low scale. Like, a lot of independent filmmakers that try to make noise in their own way that became important, like the series of Minimalist. Those guys went all independent. First time they got rejected by Netflix, and then afterwards Netflix were like, oh wow, apparently like you did your own way and people pick up on what you're doing. Okay, we'll take you. And they were like, oh, we got another prize now. Guess what? So it's kind of like, like let them play that game, because Netflix or all the other streamers won't say no. But I like what these guys did. They already had like a tech team and enabled them to. So it's like how you can extrapolate that in a way that it's for everybody, for them to prove a point and combine those offers. Because from the viewer perspective, I think, and I'm speaking as a viewer because that's all I know best, I would love to see things that I'm not expecting. That after me spending time watching it, I'm almost like a new person. I've learned about something, whatever. But guess what? My born pickup thing, and that only happens when somebody kind of like recommends it to me. But it's never because I'm purposely trying to get myself into that subject. So since switching topics is so network recommendation effect type of thing, I believe like we need to unlock that so it speeds up and it's not as limited as today. I mean, with that, Daren, I would like to kind of, because since we kind of have parallel paths that seem to go after the same vision in time, I could talk to you forever. I'm conscious that we have a limited time. You're not. I'm already really grateful that you accepted this podcast. Nonetheless, if you want to like give that, this is how I close most podcasts. Even though like I might want to close it differently this time. So I'll add two questions. One that is generally speaking, how exactly what is like the most truthful, not so obvious advice that you will give to anybody who is already in the industry but kind of blindfolded because it's playing the wrong game, like.
Yeah, that one I think we may have covered, right? It's this
Yes, we did.
idea that you've got to take responsibility for more than just the production of the movie. You've got to create the situation where you are oversubscribed. There's more demand for what you have than supply. And you've got to think bigger than just making the movie. You've got to think about marketing and distribution. You've got to think about audience building and connecting and engaging with an audience on a regular basis and showing up and creating something that's valuable, that creates this tension between what you have and what they don't have, and they want it, but they can't get it until it comes out on Friday, right? Like that's good tension that you want to create with your audience. So I think it's that. It's expanding what we're responsible for and saying, no, if we want to be successful and self-sustaining here, then we need to take responsibility for all of it.
I had a conversation with you as if we've never be seen by, but I'm kind of forgetting, like, actually this is a podcast, and I'm sure like Sebastian is going to cut this part, but you said something about, we talked about time, and one of the things that I was thinking is, in 2020, we had a moment of pause that we as human beings, because COVID, we never afforded ourselves, at least for me and many others, and they had tough times, and it's like a bunch of emotions, like a tsunami came to us from grief to reinvention to many things together. But at some point, like, we all sat down with ourselves and said, who am I, and am I who I want to be? And I think, like, after all the grief and everything, we did allow ourselves that, which is the most dangerous thing can happen to society, because so many people went freelancing and, like, farming. It's crazy. Like it's like the world organized itself through its true nature. My question is, Daren, are you, one, because I'm trying to be respectful, not trying to put you in the bucket, were you one of those ones? And if you were, are you on the path of how you were thinking of yourself? Or how would you imagine yourself 2 years from now if you ever kind of took a chance to gain some perspective on your own doings?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. I had my kind of wake up call in 2019, so the year before the pandemic, and it was just kind of serendipitous or a blessing that it happened when it did. So 2019 was a hard year, both in business and in just life. I was struggling with a lot of things and self-identity and all these kind of things, and going, I don't feel like I am who I want to be, or I'm doing what I want to do. And it was, all of that business-wise was around, I'm not producing movies. I want to be producing movies. And so the shift that happened was kind of this idea of self-authoring and saying, what do I want to be doing? Who do I want to be? What do I want to spend my time on? What kind of impact do I want to have? And it's this idea of being outcome focused. So my company's called Craftsman Films, and it's kind of a callback to this idea of the craftsman mindset, which comes from Cal Newport's book, So Good They Can't Ignore You. So if you read that book, he talks about the passion mindset versus the craftsman mindset, and that resonated so hard with me. And I've now named two businesses after Craftsman, right? So
Wow.
this idea
Typed it
of,
down, by the way. I'm a big reader.
there you
Sorry.
go. It's a good one. It's a rabbit hole too. He has a lot of good books, but his idea of being outcome focused and having an outcome focused approach to creative work was really resonant with me. And so I just took it at face value and said, okay, what if I try that? Because what I've tried the last 12 years isn't working. But I can directly map, like, from making that decision to I want to be an independent film producer and do a movie here in Utah in the next year, to within a year producing a movie. And so it was like, okay, well, maybe this has some legs. Maybe this has some validity to it. And that's how I operate all the time. And so as I'm thinking about, okay, I did one movie, now I want to do another one. Okay, I've done two, now I want to go bigger. So the third movie was an independent feature shot in Cape Town, South Africa, the other side of the world from where I am. So I went from being a producer to an independent or an international producer. And then with these last two movies, we have them in theaters. So now I have movies that have had box office, revenue and have been seen by tens of thousands of people. And hopefully with, the next movie, hundreds of thousands of people would be amazing. And so that's the self-authoring, or that's the outcome focused approach. Whereas what I'm doing now is really gearing up for, okay, where do I want myself in the industry and my impact to be 5 years from now? And what can I do today that sets me up for that? So that's why I started what's called Producer Fund. And it's a fund to produce a lot of movies over the next few years with a very small amount of money. Almost as small as you could possibly do it for, to show that, like, if you're responsible with your budgets, you take responsibility for every aspect, like we've talked about in this whole conversation, what does that look like? And if I can prove that it's profitable more often than not, then that's a new model that anyone can follow. And I'm writing about it and getting on podcasts, and I have my own podcast, and I'm on social media telling people what I'm doing and really just journaling the process as we're going through it, so that there is a place that people can go and say, well, he did it. How do I do it? Oh my gosh, it's right here. He wrote it all down. Thanks, Daren.
I would actually, ironically, but not ironically, it is a big thanks, Daren, because you have opened up in a very transparent way to speak up, like, about the issues and about the current challenges that even yourself you face. Daren, like you mentioned right now, the fund, which we haven't talked about it before, so that kind of like extends a little bit for 2 minutes our conversation here. Why did you do it in the first place? It's because you think creativity is not brave enough, or it's kind of like lacking? Because I know sometimes attention requires a famous actor to play the role, and that alone is going to create a story. But if we take that aside, do you think like creativity today it's being repressed, or sorry, I don't want to like kind of put a navigation into how you're supposed to answer this. Back to my question: why the fund in first place, like the nonprofit?
Why do it now, or why didn't I do it in the first
No,
place?
why did you do it? Like the
Oh,
nonprofit. What were the intentions of like starting?
yeah. So
I feel
I've
like
done
you're
four
not busy
movies.
enough with everything you've
Right.
done.
Right. Well, look, I've done four movies as an independent producer, and the last one we produced last year. So it's been a year since I've been on set, which is kind of frustrating, but I'm fixing that soon. So with every single one, I was hired by the production to come in as a producer and help produce the movie. The first two movies, I had nothing to do with distribution, marketing, anything post-production. With these last two movies, I've been very involved, which has been really satisfying and fulfilling. But with each movie, I've seen that there are things that I would do differently, or things that didn't work out in the way we had hoped. And I just am a problem solver by nature. I like looking at problems and dissecting them and figuring out where's the constraint here and how do we optimize this. And I think in terms of systems and how things are interconnected. And so it's just my nature. And so last year, about May of last year, before we actually produced the fourth movie, I had this idea of, okay, I think I actually have enough leverage to do something like this, where I could raise more than just the budget for the next movie. What if I raised $10 million? What could I do with 10 million? Is that 2 movies or 5 movies or 10 movies? Like, I think I'm actually at the point where I could do 10 movies because I have leverage to be able to do distribution deals up front, to be able to do minimum guarantee lending and tax credit lending and all these other strategies that is pretty well known in the industry among indie producers, but maybe not here in Utah. But I think now that I've got 4 movies under my belt, now that I've got 2 movies in theaters, and hopefully, they do great numbers and a lot of people see them, and that's more credit to me to say, oh, this is someone who knows what they're doing. If I say, here's where I'm going next, join me, that's way better now than it would have been 4 years ago if I did that first. So I kind of answered both questions, why now and why am I doing it and why didn't I do it before? But the reason I'm doing it now is because I think that I want just more control over the entire process. So it's a little self-serving, but I think in being self-serving, I actually have more opportunity to have an impact on the people that I work with, who I love. Like the hardest thing for me is to get to the end of a production. We've been working together for weeks and weeks and weeks, 15-hour days, 10-hour days, 16-hour days, whatever it is. And we get to the end and they go, I loved this experience. It's so different than anywhere else I've worked or any other production I've worked on. What are you doing next? And when I have to say, I don't know, that really hurts because I'm letting them
Yeah,
down.
I mean,
It
I
feels
can
like I'm
only
letting them
imagine.
down. And so now I want to be able to say, hey, this is the first movie, but I've got 2 more this year and 3 next year and 3 the year after that. And that's going to be a cadence that, I mean, what does it look like if you can pay people enough to where they can work 9 months and then take 3 months off, take off, Thanksgiving to mid-January and then come back in February to start on the next year's worth of stuff. Like, what does that look like? Isn't that amazing? But I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but like that's the kind of altruism that you would never see from the
Mm,
studio. And so
yes.
we can't expect them to treat us better because anytime we make demands, like with the strikes last year, great, we won and we got a lot of good things happening. But what happened in response to that is now they went outside of LA where those contracts are like in place. They're going, well, we'll just shoot it in London where there's a 40% tax credit or we'll go to Cape Town
Oh,
where
I
it
see.
costs less to film there, but the production value is the same. Like we inadvertently hurt the industry and now we're suffering this year even worse than last year when we were on strike because I think we're going about it the wrong way, which is unfortunately we're trying to
See.
get these big behemoth giant gatekeepers to open the gates and let us in and give us all the money, and that's not in their best interest, unfortunately. So they're never
I
going to do that.
I see. Oh, actually, it's coming really clear to me on your intents here. I mean, with the times that like the film industry it's living right now, I think Darren, you're like just at a start, a very successful initiative. Because we spoke to a lot that actually we're gonna make reference to what you're doing afterwards through an email, but it's very impressive that you took the time to even come across these ideas because you could have might as well be very entertained by just doing movies and that alone. So you took a bigger task at hand, and I'm first grateful for it, despite not being in the industry. So imagine like the others that are actually in the industry, what would they say? So that is highly appreciative because you shouldn't have done it, yet you did it.
Well, thank you. It means a lot to hear hear that it's resonating, and I just hope that the more people that hear about it, that more people that will get in touch and want to be a part of it, and we can actually pull this off. So I'm excited for what's ahead.
You just picked the best time of all because if you would have decided to do this like 5 6 years ago, I don't think like the response would have been the same. But
Yeah.
right now, a lot of things, me coming from the pure internet logic perspective, we've had artists complaining that their art is not being seen, and there was like the NFT wave and this wave and the crypto wave, and
Hmm.
that's nothing but people explaining how things supposed to be working, right? And I think a lot it's resonating to also like not going so extreme as those communities went, but finding a middle way where it is just next step that I can use in my imagination. But one of the things I would say, Darren, is that you're actually a very, very good at articulating things, and I would love to see that because I have a strong belief that we can't picture things just because we don't know how we will feel if they exist, how that will look like. and we're lacking imagination. So I believe like the conversation we had today, we open it up slightly a little bit, but for those that don't even understand it, it's just about repeating. So I would love to pick up on this conversation with you again very soon at a certain level, and perhaps like level up now that we have introduced and tell us, Faith of Angels, it's in the theaters, US, right?
Yeah.
By the way,
It's
I saw.
ending its run, so we may be in 10 theaters this week, but Faith of Angels is coming to the end of its run. The Carpenter comes out November 1st, which is this Friday as we're recording this. Both of them will have lives after theaters. So we're talking to international distributors, we're talking to streamers, we're putting deals together for both. And so they will be available at some point in 2025, wherever you stream your movies.
I gotta say, like the ratings for Fate of Angels were quite high. So
Yeah.
no, it's not like you love one kid or the other. It's just like maybe you've tackled an audience that resonated most with it. But congratulations for that. It's an honor
Thank
to
you.
have had a discussion with you today, Daren. And I'm really grateful that you've been very, you answered from heart, and we had a conversation as close as possibly could have been without thinking like we're trying to please somebody through the answers.
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
there's
well,
a,
anytime, if you want me to come back on, if you have questions from the audience from this episode, I love doing podcasts. I love talking about this stuff. I think the more people hear about it, the more impact we can have. So anytime, I'd love to come back on.
awesome. So, Daren, thank you so much.